What's up everyone, you asked for it and here it is, another debate, another video about debates, back from Fire Emblem Fusion. This time I took a debate from 2007. Now if you've watched my Ike versus Kieran video where Raken argued against Inui and pretty much all of Fire Emblem Fusion that Kieran was better than Ike, using good arguments, you might remember him. He's back in this video, Raken, and he's up against Katz, another guy who made a brief cameo in that one. This is an actual debate tournament. I haven't talked very much about these, I've mentioned them a couple times, but debate tournaments were not about making a tier list or being right per se, like trying to convince other people. Not per se. What they were about is trying to win the debate by having better arguments. What happened was, you sign up for a tournament, they make a bracket for you, you go head to head, 1 versus 1, and then you debate, and you pick a unit, and it doesn't really matter what tier they are, as long as you're like comfortable with the matchup, and what you're trying to do is make the better argument against someone else. So it could be Wendy versus Milady, and it would be valid, but you probably want to pick them a little bit closer, because at the end the judges look at who was more convincing, and if you manage to make more convincing arguments than your opponents, so even if I'm arguing Milady, and Mangs is arguing Wendy, and Mangs has the better arguments, he wins the debate as long as the judges vote for him, which of course they might be a little bit biased, but whatever. So they don't vote for which unit they think is better, they vote for who made the better arguments. Yeah, so with that in mind, this debate, Katz versus Raken, is Sophia versus Wade. Katz is defending Wade, and Raken is defending Sophia. You might think, you know, easy dub for Wade, because as bad as he is, Sophia's even worse, but I picked this debate because both it has very interesting and pretty funny arguments, and because it's pretty short, so I can go into detail a little bit without the video being like 2 hours long. But oh my god, I love this debate, it's so funny. And it's so silly. There's a lot of things to talk about, so let's just get into it, alright? As you can see, Inui is very excited for this debate. Language in this video, in this debate is kind of weird. I'm probably gonna like censor it out a little bit when I'm talking, but the text might be a little bit offensive sometimes, because I think these people were like teenagers back then. Just so you know. Anyway, the cat started out by quoting a post from Raken in the hub thread, whereas Raken is like, Sophia's fail stat starts out cat, which is a good way to put it. And now Katz is going to show just how bad Sophia is, even compared to a unit like Wade. So he says, indeed it does. Level 1 in chapter 14 is obviously terrible. Ward joins on a higher level 12 chapters earlier, and he says run level lead hacks.exe. This is referring to how Katz kind of sort of is referred to as a robot sometimes. He likes crunching numbers. And then he lists just how bad Sophia looks. Now you can see Sophia's basis versus Ward's basis, and the comparison put below, and all the numbers here. I'll go over them briefly because they're pretty funny. Ward wins in every stat except for resistance, which Sophia wins by 4. Ward wins by 14 attack, 33 hit, 21 crits, 4 attack speed. Never thought I'd see Ward be faster than anything. 25 HP. He's like, he has more than twice as much HP, almost 3 times as much. He has 10 more defense, and 42 more avoid, and then 20 more crit avoid. And it lists like 16 attack is needed to one kill Sophia, 8 AS is needed to double attack Sophia, 91 hit or more on an enemy is needed to have 90% real hit on Sophia, and 8 skill or more is needed to have a crit rate on Sophia. So that's just how bad Sophia is, or as he puts it, lololololololololololol. This is what you want to do in the debate. If you have an advantage, you want to press it. If I'm arguing for Rutger against someone else arguing Milady, it's in my best interest to argue that Rutger has a level lead, that he's faster, that he has a much better joining time, that his boss killing potential is better. Whereas the Milady side should argue just how good flyer utility is and how good concrete durability is. You want to press your advantages. In this case, clearly Ward has statistical advantages, which is something he's not able to say a lot. So good job by Katz showing just how amazing Ward's stat lead is. It is worth noting that he gave Ward an A support with Lots and a B support with Deke. I don't know how viable it is to have both of those build up in chapter 14. Keep in mind this is in the context of a ranked run, so things like the experience rank matter. And I don't think you can have a level 18 Ward with A Lot, B Deke, and still be able to S rank the game. But people back then, they didn't really play a whole lot, they just kind of pretended they did, or just kind of theoretically played the game on paper, I guess I would say. And that's what you end up with then. You get a full support lineup between 2 characters. I mean, the supports are kind of fast, but not that fast, I would say. But this doesn't matter. If Reagan doesn't call him out on this, it doesn't matter. The point stands. If you don't counter a point and it wasn't like completely stupid, like really off the mark, and even if it was, if it doesn't get countered, it flies basically. So of course Katz knows that Reagan will never let a point fly generally, so he's like, you can probably complain about Ward's level and supports being too high or something, but it matters little. He's still vigorously and energetically doing something to Sophia with a chainsaw. Oh, and that leads me to another thing. Ward is Leatherface except with an axe instead of a chainsaw, because obviously they don't have chainsaws in Alive. So Ward is a huge guy that cuts people up for the hell of it. Sounds like a valuable asset to your army. People did this kind of shit in the opening post a lot. They just post some kind of flavor thing to make it less dry. It's always kind of funny. As for Sophia, I don't know what the fuck she's supposed to be. I think they only put her in the game so that she could get done something to her by Ward. The only thing she has going for her is that I can see is that she gives you a talisman or something in FE7. Again, this is not true. Sophia gives you a guiding ring in this very game. But again, if Reagan doesn't say that, the point stands. Ward has a fairly high fail stat, but as Reagan said, Sophia starts out capped. Ward obviously owns her on stats, and he also has supports that are actually good for his partners. I really don't see how Sophia can ever compensate for the gap in initial utility, even if she somehow manages to catch up, which she likely won't. Sophia is like Nino's evil twin. Good post. I mean, I would never have accepted this matchup, Sophia versus Ward. Like, Ward is obviously much better, especially when you're just looking at statistical comparisons. But he did a good job, so he could have just winged it and said, yeah, Ward is obviously better and not elaborated on anything, but he did, so good job. Let's see if Reagan managed to do anything. Okay, first of all, I just want to say, look at how short this post is. Reagan didn't post like anything, and this is funny because Reagan's one of the few people who might be able to get away with this because he's very good at making very short but good arguments. He's very succinct, I think that's the way you're supposed to say it.
Succinct.
But he actually brings up a couple good points, but he's also going to leave a lot of shit uncountered. So this post overall, not the greatest, but let's go over it. So the problem here is that Ward can't use level lead hacks.exe. He has to actually fight things to level up, which is bad because he sucks at fighting, and sucking is a bad thing obviously. By the time Sophia joins, he has a lot of suck built up, and Sophia doesn't have any yet. See, this is a very interesting point. It sounds stupid. It sounds very stupid. He's basically saying Ward is a liability to your army across, like, between chapters 2 and chapter 14, whereas when Sophia joins, she hasn't been a liability yet. So he's basically saying if you're a good unit and you're available a lot, that's a good thing. But if you're a bad unit, you're probably better off not being available because you have less time to suck. Which is a very interesting way to looking at it. And I think, you know, again, if Katz doesn't counter this, he has a point. Now he continues. Now they're both crappy, but at least Sophia is helping the XP rank. Where's the positive to using Ward? Oh, but you can just not use Ward and just wait until later, so that he would be helping the XP rank, right? Sure, but then he's likely to get killed. See, when Sophia attacks, she doesn't have to get countered. Ward can attack at range as well, but then his hit becomes horrible, because, you know, hand axes. The two-round system is working against him, and to a large extent. Like, 20% real hit for the loss, so that option doesn't exist for Ward. Sucking but helping the XP rank is better than just sucking. This is a really interesting angle to take on this. He's like, okay, both of these units suck, but at least Sophia helps the XP rank. So Sophia has something going for her, and Ward has nothing going for him. He's just bad all game long. Also, and he does counter the guiding ring point. He says she gets you a guiding ring in this game. That alone beats anything that Ward does anything for you. Also, once Sophia promotes, she can actually be useful with healing and junk. Yeah, because she gets E rank staves. Yay, it's pretty good. So there's probably a couple things he left unaddressed there, but pretty funny way to turn this debate around and basically saying the stats don't matter, they both suck. And it's up to Katz to counterattack. So because Katz basically went over all the stats in his opening post and Reagan didn't really counter anything out of it, he just tried to move the goalposts basically. I'm saying that as if it's a negative thing, but it was actually a good move. Because obviously Sophia cannot win a debate based on stats. But because Reagan's post was so short, Katz gets to be short as well. So Katz is like, are you kidding? Ward has had a lot of levels to grow his fill stat. Yes, I'll grant that. But Sophia starts off capped and stays that way. Ward is better than Sophia from the instant he joins until the end of the game. Also, Ward is probably forced in some later game chapters anyway, unless it's like FE7 or FE8 and the preparation screen is available right away. I forgot about this, but Katz at this point in time hadn't actually played FE6. He's debating this game without playing it at all. He's just looking at the stats and adjoining chapters and like the enemy stats, and he's like, okay, this is how good this character is, and he's just gonna debate it. Which it works if you're only arguing on paper, but in practice it means you're probably like, what you say probably doesn't apply to reality. But in a debate universe, it works for him. Katz is good enough to get away with this. And regardless of that, I dare say the gap between using Ward and using Deke or someone early on is less than the gap between Ward and Sophia when a little girl joins. Ward, when he joins, might be on the lower end of your units. Might be. It probably is. But even if he is, the gap isn't very large or anything. While Sophia is leagues below everybody when she joins. In the face of these facts, Ward is winner. Fucking lead speak always gets to me. And then he says, using either one is a negative, don't pretend otherwise. Having Sophia pad the XP rank is dumb. Sophia is obviously much better for that task. Silly argument in my opinion, because saying having this person do that is bad. Just use another person for it, because it's still something that a unit can do that the other cannot. And for the XP rank in particular, you probably need multiple people to pad it. But again, if Reagan doesn't call it out, silly argument. The argument he made before about the gap between Ward and the next worst unit, or even Deke, and the gap between Sophia and the next worst unit is probably a lot bigger, which I think is a good way of going against Reagan's while they both suck. Like, obviously they both don't suck to the same extent. And then sucking but helping XP rank is better than just sucking. He says sucking giant hairy donkey balls is a lot worse than just sucking. It's just a good way to put it. It's a bit crude. And Reagan again makes a very short post to counter this. He's like, 10 times -6 is a lot less than 0 times whatever negative number you want here. When Sophia joins, Ward has been hurting the team much longer, and therefore much more. And then he counters the argument of how big the gap is, and Reagan's like, no, Ward is getting doubled by several enemies, like even the Cavaliers in Chapter 4, and obviously by mercenaries and nomads, and having the lowest defense of any of your physical attackers doesn't help. And he has about 55 hit on enemies. No one else sucks that much. But Sophia starts off capped and stays that way. Stays that way hardly. And then he quotes his own post saying, also, when Sophia promotes, she can actually be useful with healing and junk. Yeah, E-staffs, so good. Yeah, again, he's basically saying, doesn't matter how bad Sophia is, when she joins, her suck stat is 0, whereas Ward has been around and doing bad things for a lot. And I think there is merit to this argument somewhat. I don't think it applies here, because if you're committed to using Ward, you can use him, in 2 ways. Either you can use him as much as it takes for him to be the positive utility, which in his case is probably using him until you have the prep screen, and then just dropping him like a brick, and then he has positive utility because he's forced on the map. He doesn't cost you anything to use, except maybe that he takes a little bit of XP from your other guys, but considering the XP rank is in play, that doesn't really matter anyway. So Ward being around is a strict positive for the early game, because you have no alternatives, right? You're better off using him than not using him at all. Even if he just rescue drops one guy ever in all of early game, that's still a positive thing. If he doesn't see combat ever. So that's one way you can use him. The other way you can use him is using him full time, supporting him with Lotta and Deke, and just trying to get things out of him, which I still think is positive overall, just because he's providing support bonuses and helping you out where he can. Like, as long as you make sure to never put him in risky situations, there's no way a unit being around is actually bad for you. The only really bad thing about it is that he takes up a unit slot that someone else could have. But like, that means you don't get to deploy like maybe a filler Cavalier somewhere around the way. Like, maybe you have to play the Western Isles, and instead of deploying Trek, you deploy Ward. That's annoying, but it's not great. And I don't think an empty unit slot, courtesy of Sophia, really does very much for Sophia in this kind of context, because you still have to use the other unit instead of Ward. So it's not really utility that Sophia provides or anything. It's just an empty unit slot that you can fill in with someone else. But Sophia shouldn't get points for however much, you know, Trek helps you or something. I think it cuts into the utility of Ward being around, but not enough to where he's in negative. And then Reagan repeats his point saying, I know that, so what? The point is that if you use Ward, all you get is suck, and if you use Sophia, you'll still get suck, but you also get help with the XP rank, and a free guiding ring, and staffs at promotion. Winner, Sophia. So again, basically saying they both suck, but Sophia has some positives, whereas Ward has none, which I think isn't true, but I think Katz could be doing a better job of showing that Ward can be a positive, but he's about to do it in the next post, because it's about to get serious. That's right. go off on a side tangent like this and ignore the actual point being made. The main point, restated in a more concise form so that you have no more opportunities to try and divert it, is this. So this is not something he's doing for Raken, because Raken knows what he's doing. He knows that he's trying to do this. He's making clear to the judges that he made a point and Raken did not do a great job of countering it. I dare say the gap between using Ward and Deke, or the gap between Ward and Deke is not as big as the gap between Ward and Sophia, is basically his point. Alright, and then Raken talked about the healing staves after promotion and whatever else. He says junk, but I don't think there's actually anything else besides E-staves. So Kat's kind of ignored that up to this point, and that was a pretty bad move. So now he's gonna talk about just how much that does for her after she promotes. That is not happening without considerable babysitting. Sophia can kill nothing at all on her own when she first joins and gets killed by everything. Her joining situation is by far the worst in the entire game, I believe. She has to be blocked off a lot so that she doesn't get screwed over, and has to have others severely weaken things for her, frequently going out of their way to do so in order to ever kill anything. And even when she has a shot at finishing something, her hit is terrible. At base level, 75 hit with Flux is 50 hit against an enemy with 10 AS and 5 luck. Not unreasonable at all for an FD6 hard mode enemy. So take the amount of times you have to weaken things for her already, and multiply it by 2 to account for all the times she misses. Wow, even more suck. No, suck is still a huge understatement. I don't even know how to express this properly, how massive this is. Worst combat utility possible, pretty much. So the positive of staff utility and promotion would be matched, and indeed overcome by the negative of the insane amount of babying which she needs in order to reach that point in the first place. So he just did a good job of illustrating not just that Ward has better stats, because this paragraph wasn't really about Ward, but he also just talked about just how hard it is to get Sophia to level 10 to begin with. Actually, scratch that. Her incredibly crappy durability after promotion even counters it already. Promoted Sophia gives you another healer to help keep others alive, but she herself is a very frail unit that dies when sneezed on, and then the babying needed to gain stabs at all will just be a massive amount of fail stacked on top of that. A very good way of showing that after promotion, like Raken made it look like Sophia after promotion is like, okay, I'll just use staff utility and be good, but no, it's not that simple. Getting her to promotion is hard, and then having her heal stuff doesn't even help you very much because she herself needs so much babying and protection. But Ward liability too, not to nearly the same extent as Sophia. This is what we want to hear. A 2010 Ward with Lot and Deke support faces only 7% real hit from the Chapter 21 Steel Lance Wyvern Knights, Dragon Knights, whatever, and takes 5 hits from them in order to die. A 2010 Sophia, extremely lenient to her, faces 43% real hit and dies in only 2 hits. That's an overwhelming durability advantage for Ward, even when Sophia was assumed to be on the same level, which is almost certainly not going to happen. The simple fact that Ward should be a few levels away from promotion when Sophia joins at 1-0, basically level 1, tier 1, is evidence enough that it should never be on the same level. In fact, excuse me, we'll take it even further than that and remove Ward's supports. Now he's 4-hit KO'd at the same hit as Sophia, so even with absurd favoritism shown towards Sophia, assuming she's on the same level as Ward, taking off Ward's supports, Ward still lives twice as long in a given example. If the situation is bad for Sophia when everything is played in her favor to the greatest extent that is even remotely reasonable, then imagine what it's like when the situation is viewed realistically. In case your imagination is weak, I'll just let you know it's not a pretty sight. Oh, wait, we didn't factor in Ward's weapon triangle advantage over Wyverns in this situation, did we? And just when I thought things couldn't get any uglier for Sophia. Anyway, so this is what you want to do. You want to show that even if you're like tipping the scales a little bit in favor of Sophia, even if you're favoring her a lot, even if you're giving him all the leg room you could be giving him, Sophia still looks bad. That means that not only does it take away your opponent's option of saying, well, you didn't give Sophia enough levels or enough supports or whatever, or you gave Ward too many levels. Even if your opponent says that, it doesn't matter because you're already being super generous. So, good job of showing that Ward doesn't just suck, but even though he sucks, he's still miles and miles better than Sophia. As for Sophia's help to the XP rank with your totes, first, remember that terrible base hit I mentioned earlier? Getting high XP gains half the time doesn't look so good when you only get 1 XP the other half of the time. Very creative way of countering that, I will say. Second, I bring up in response, the fact that Ward actually has supports and is actually the best option for Deke and Lot. And he quotes from a different debate where he shows that the supports that Deke gives are better and faster for that he gives to Deke are better and faster than, for example, Clarines, because Clarines support is very slow, and the bonuses are better because Ward is fire affinity, I think. So adding stats to other units is obvious win, but Sophia support Fa and Igren, and then he's gonna counter Fa and Igren. Now, support arguments are generally, they turn into like mini character debates, because in order for two characters to support, they obviously have both to be in play. So now they're gonna argue about how good Fa and Igren are, and I've been going for like 20 minutes already, minus the time I'm cutting out, so I'm gonna skip it over a little bit, because it's like, I kind of want to stay on topic, and debates are pretty long. Even this one is like, it's not that long for a debate, but it's still kind of long. But they basically start arguing about whether these units are good enough to be fielded, and whether they get to stand next to the other one or whatever. I will say though one thing, he brings up that Fa is allowed in a low tiers tournament, and that makes her bad, which Raken counters pretty handedly. Obviously what is allowed and what is not allowed is determined by the judges of the debates or the leader. I think in this case that was Inui, so that's about all I will have to say about that. So there's a bit of a sum up here, like Sophia has staffs with crappy durability as promotion compared to Ward. Sophia can help the XP rank a bit, and Ward transfers support bonuses over to make his partners that much better. Objectively, it is impossible to prove beyond doubt that one or the other of these is better. They are not things which can be measured in concrete numbers. So as far as I know, though I'd be much more inclined to favor Ward on the first point at least, considering just how bad Sophia's durability is. Therefore, from a logical and unbiased standpoint, a winner can but not be declared from these facts alone. This is a funny tactic that I've seen Cats use a lot. I've actually debated against him, and he's used this against me too. He takes two things, two advantages, two big ones usually, and he says, well, we can't really agree on, we can't really determine through numbers which one of these is better, so we're just calling it a draw, because, and then he's going to push some other advantages that the other character doesn't have, and says, okay, these two things, we can like put them up against each other and they're a tie, but I have other things, so I win the debate overall. It's a funny debate tactic. Then most of this is like repeating, so I'm gonna skip a little bit. Oh yeah, they're gonna talk about the guiding ring, the free guiding ring. First, I'm confused as to how you figure this and would like an explanation. She doesn't join with one. If you get one for recruiting her or something, or deploying her in one chapter, that doesn't require her to be used. This is the problem when you don't play the game you're debating in. You don't know how the guiding ring works. I actually think Sophia's guiding ring is a very interesting bit on how you interpret character strengths. I like to count Sophia's guiding ring as a point in her favor, because she's the only one who can get it. You need to actually move her to get it, and I fail to see how it's different from a thief getting a chest in a certain chapter. But I've debated this over with a couple people, such as Velkoma. We actually have an interesting discussion on this. If I remember, I'll put it in the description. And Velkoma was saying, well, I don't count Chad's chest getting in chapter 3, and I think not in chapter 6, I'm not sure, because in chapter 3 he's the only option of getting those, so the player doesn't actually have a choice, have to make any kind of decision, any kind of drawback on whether to get those chests or not, or who to use for those chests, because Sophia is force deployed in the desert chapter, so it's not like there's any alternative to having to get the guiding ring. And for me, that's a positive for Sophia, because it means it's something only she can do. You don't have an alternative. So it's utility that Sophia provides and no one else. But Velkoma's argument is basically, if I don't have to make any kind of decision in order to get this advantage, then does it really count? It's always going to happen. Which I think is like two sides of an interesting coin. And they get into that a little bit too. But Katz doesn't know how Sophia getting the guiding ring works, so he actually has to ask during a debate. You would think that he would be smart enough to ask someone, like a messenger or something, like just PM Inui or something, and say like, hey, what does he mean with this guiding ring? Or he could look it up on Strengths Force. I'm pretty sure it was up there even back then. So that's a little bit weird. And then he's like, second, it's entirely insignificant regardless. This game's funds rank is even more lenient than FE7's, which is already caked to S rank. Another 10k in assets means almost nothing at all towards that. Even if it mattered, which it doesn't, Ward can counter it by the fact that axes are considerably cheaper than darkened staffs. Good attempt, I guess, but Raken is going to do something really funny to this a little bit. Oh, we actually looked it up at Strand's Forest. She can pick it up. Well, like I said already, she doesn't have to be trained anything except field of one chapter to get that. And I don't think people get points for items they join with, which is the same situation. For example, Louise joins with a white gem and must be fielded for one chapter. Similar to the way that Dart must be fielded at one chapter to get the Geats. but you never get to hear him being boosted on tier lists because of it. Also a very interesting point. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine that people go like, well, Nephine's bad because she joins with a Steel Great Lance, or Louise good, or well, the only good thing about Louise is her joining with a white gem or whatever. Kind of pet peeves of mine because I never have to use those characters to use them items. I can just trade them off them, or just sell it in the prep screen. It doesn't really say anything about Louise, that the fact that she joins with a white gem. Like, if Penth joined with a white gem, it would be the exact same thing. But yeah, this is where I kind of got that view from, this kind of debate. So Raken makes another interesting tactical maneuver here. He quotes a part by Cats and it just says, sure. I feel like if you were not going to counter the thing about the supports, you might as well just leave it out of your post and hope the judges don't notice, but that's just me. And this post, oh, it's actually the last post by Raken. So that means that nothing he says here can be countered by Cats. And this is good for Raken because it means he can make stupid arguments and they won't be countered, but it also means that the post usually gets less weight in the judging process, because if your opponent doesn't have a chance to counter your points and you start bringing up all kinds of new shit, that kind of makes it easy to sneak dumb arguments in there. So unless the argument is really good, it generally doesn't get countered per se. I know some people judge like that. So generally, the most weight is given to the posts in the middle, because openers are easy to make because they don't have to counter anything, and closes are easy to make because they don't get countered at all. So if you bring up really good arguments in your closer and you didn't bring them up before, that kind of makes people question, why didn't you bring it up earlier if it's such a good argument? But they started debating kind of late. Raken's posts were very short early on, so I'm kind of sad that this post doesn't get countered, but let's go over it. So Raken rightfully brings up Fa being allowed in low tiers doesn't really say anything. Echidna was allowed in low tiers as well. Fa doesn't start out good, no, but it lasts for an extremely short time. So thankfully that got countered. They talk a little bit more about supports and Igran. I don't really want to talk about Igran because it's not super interesting. Okay, the stuff about the joining inventories and the Guiding Ring. Louise, you don't have to use ever. She can go untouched the entire chapter and never move or do anything, and you still get the white gem. So of course she doesn't get any credit for it. Even if she got killed off on the first turn, you would still get it. Dart recruiting Geats gives you the weapons Geats has, sure, but for you to get anything else, you have to start fighting with Geats, not Dart, so it's a minimal advantage. It cuts out a bit of his extra promotion cost, and that's about it. This is my favorite way of interpreting other units being recruited by other units. I don't give Dart credit for Geats' fighting utility, but in order to get Geats' weapons, like if I never plan on using Geats, but I want the things he comes with, I think it's like Steel Axe, Steel Bow, I still have to talk to Geats with Dart, so I still have to use Dart for a little bit. But if I'm planning to ignore Geats for the rest of the playthrough, then all the recruitment does for me is getting me the weapons that Geats has. This is my favorite way of interpreting units with joining with certain weapons. Axes are only cheaper than Dark and Staves if you're only using low level axes like Iron. Iron plus Killer is about the same weight as Flux plus Heal, even assuming he uses Iron much more than he uses Killer. I think this is a very cool, very brief way of describing this, but he should at least have brought up the numbers, I think, because now he could just be talking out of his ass, and the judges would have to like fact check what he says, but that's not the job of the judges. The judges just have to look at the arguments, and they're not supposed to like do background research on the cost of weapons. I can't be bothered to check this because they're talking about it on like a per use basis, so fuck calculating that. But it's an interesting way to counter it. And this right here, this is my favorite argument in the entire freaking debate. This is how good Raken is at debating, okay? So he's like, if the extra funds is insignificant, I could give Sophia a couple of angelic robes and a couple of Nosferatu tomes. Now the funds gap is in the other direction, but still just as significant. Durability problems after promotion? No longer. With those full hit supports, she doesn't even need any angelic robes, since she isn't missing. She just needs Nosferatu for a full heal anytime she gets hit. So even if you suddenly decide that the cost does matter, she still doesn't have durability problems. This is my favorite, not because it's true, because obviously this is gonna get you killed very fast with Sophia, because she will probably miss anyway, even with the full hit supports. And Nosferatu even weighs her down a little bit, so she might get doubled and stuff. But what I find funny is that he caught Cat saying, well, 10k doesn't really matter. So he's saying, okay, then I can use 20k to my advantage to make one of Sophia's other advantages go away, or one of her other problems go away. And now they still have a fun scam, but it doesn't matter. You said it didn't matter, so I'm just going to use it to my advantage. I think that was very funny. But he can only get away with this because he had to use Sophia for the guiding ring, which he didn't actually mention in this paragraph, but that was what he's implying. That Louise and Dart were very different from Sophia in getting the guiding ring. And then he talks about the durability gap between Ward and Sophia, and this is about late game, so he's assuming Sophia's promoted. And he's like, Sophia takes shitloads of damage when she gets hit, but she doesn't have anywhere near reliable avoid, but she heals it all back with Nosferatu, so it doesn't matter. I don't actually think this is true. I don't think Sophia's magic is high enough to heal back every bit of damage down to her. And again, she can get doubled and killed, but this is a closer, so Cats never gets to bring this up, unfortunately. Oh, and he also like, brings up early promotion for Sophia, like promoting her at level 15 or 10. It's funny that this wasn't brought up earlier, actually. Yeah, this is a very confusing paragraph. Rickon is like, yeah, 50 hit is pretty bad, referring to Sophia at base level in chapter 14, but Ward's 55 hit when he joined isn't much better. Is the gap between using Ward and using Deke or someone early on less than the gap between Ward and Sophia when she joins? Well, the gap in hit is about the same. I would argue it's not. I think when Sophia joins, people definitely have a lot better hit than when Ward joins, like much more than a 5 hit advantage. Others also had the advantage of doubling when Ward was not, but Ward doesn't even have that advantage on Sophia. His advantage in damage makes up for that though. I don't know what this is supposed to accomplish, this argument, because first of all, a lot of people in FE6 don't even double. Like Rutger does and Shin does and Sue does, for example. But a lot of people also don't, and in those cases Ward actually does more damage than a lot of people. Or sometimes both people double, like against soldiers and knights. And he's like, now the biggest difference is that when Sophia joins, having a crappy unit is much more manageable. While it's not all in just when they join, some of it is in the difference between them as well. Sophia is ranged, so when she attacks, she doesn't get countered like Ward has. You can argue that Ward's much better durability in comparison to Sophia's make up for this, but never getting attacked at all is certainly better than getting countered even with more durability. And Ward is often getting doubled on the counter, and that's still happening when Sophia joins. Of course, there's also enemy phase, but there's not a problem for Ward. When he attacks, unless he kills the enemy, which he definitely isn't doing when he misses, and often isn't doing even when he hits, since if another unit already attacked, they're now in the way, making it harder for Ward to attack as well. Anyway, unless he kills the enemy, it's much harder for someone to come in and finish it off, since he's in the way. Since Sophia is ranged, she isn't getting in the way, so she doesn't have this problem. So if you can't finish that enemy, Ward is taking a second attack from it, in addition to any other attacks, which are much more likely to happen, since he's at the front instead of further back, and behind people and stuff, like Sophia. And that's mostly it for the difference between the units themselves. The rest of the difference is that it usually takes 2 to 3 rounds for people to kill enemies, and people aren't as durable. But when Sophia joins, it takes people 1 or 2 rounds for people to kill things, and others are more durable, and so on. So the burden of a crappy unit is much more easily handled. I think these are good arguments, I just wish he brought them up earlier, because there's things you could bring up against this, like for example, he says Ward is in the way, but enemies usually have multiple squares from where you can attack them from, not just one. It's not even 4 always, but there's definitely more than one range square for most enemies, so saying Ward is in the way, no one else can come in and finish him off, is not completely honest. These are good arguments, I just wish he brought them up earlier. But it's an interesting way to make Ward look worse early game, I guess. So there's one final sum up about the EXP rank, and that's and the rest, but that was pretty much all that was brought up. So that's a debate tournament. That's how those go. They are very silly, but they were a lot of fun, I gotta say. And this is one of my favorites of all time, especially because it's so short compared to most debates. Most of them are like super too long to read, but even this one took like a long while. So I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of video. Have a good day. I'll link to music and stuff in the description. I really need to remember to put the other link there. Yeah, okay, see you guys around. Peace, bye.